When Sarah agreed to watch her friend's daughter that Saturday evening, she expected nothing more than coloring books, bedtime stories, and perhaps a few tears over a scraped knee. At 38, her weekends had become predictably quiet. A cup of tea, a book, and the gentle hum of solitude that had become her companion since her divorce 2 years prior. She had no idea that evening would awaken something she thought had been permanently silenced. The afternoon began exactly as anticipated. Emma, a spirited 7-year-old with pigtails and gap-toothed grins, dragged Sarah through an elaborate game of princess rescue that involved every throw pillow in the living room. They painted watercolor butterflies, built a fort from dining room chairs, and shared a dinner of mac and cheese with far too much cheese, exactly how Emma insisted it should be made. By 8:30, Emma's eyelids were heavy with sleep. Sarah read 3 chapters of Charlotte's Web in her softest voice until the little girl's breathing deepened into the rhythm of dreams. She tiptoed from Emma's room, careful to avoid the creaky floorboard by the dresser, and settled onto the worn leather couch with a sigh of contentment. The house felt peacefully still. Sarah pulled out her phone, scrolling mindlessly through social media posts of friends' dinner parties and family gatherings, lives that seemed full of laughter and connection. She was so absorbed in her scrolling that she nearly jumped when she heard the front door's deadbolt turn. Standing in the doorway was Marcus, Emma's older brother, home from his second year at the state university. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The lanky teenager she remembered had transformed into something entirely different. His shoulders had broadened, his boyish features had sharpened into something more defined, and there was a confidence in the way he carried himself that hadn't existed before. "Sarah," he said, his voice deeper than she remembered, warm like honey. "I didn't know you were here tonight." She stood quickly, smoothing her sweater nervously. "Your mom asked me to watch Emma. She's asleep upstairs." The words tumbled out faster than intended, and she felt heat rise to her cheeks. Marcus dropped his backpack near the door and shrugged off his jacket, revealing a fitted navy Henley that emphasized the lean muscle of his arms. "Thanks for taking care of her. She adores you, you know." Something in his tone made Sarah look up, and when their eyes met, the air in the room seemed to shift. There was something different in the way he was looking at her, not like the neighbor lady who had known him since he was Emma's age, but like someone he was seeing for the first time. "Would you like some coffee?" she offered, needing something to do with her hands. "I made a fresh pot. I'd love some." They moved to the kitchen, and Sarah became hyper-aware of everything: the way Marcus leaned against the counter, the subtle scent of his cologne, how his presence seemed to fill the entire space. She poured 2 mugs, adding cream to hers and leaving his black, remembering somehow that he preferred it that way. "So how's school treating you?" she asked, settling onto one of the bar stools. Marcus took the seat beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "It's good. Different. I'm majoring in architecture now, switched from business last semester." His eyes lit up as he talked about his classes, his hands moving expressively as he described his latest project, a sustainable housing design for urban communities. Sarah found herself genuinely captivated, not just by what he was saying, but by the passion in his voice, the intelligence behind his ideas. When had he become so thoughtful, so articulate? When had she stopped seeing him as just her friend's son and started seeing him as this? "What about you?" Marcus asked, turning the conversation toward her. "Are you still working at the gallery?" She nodded. "Still there. It's not exactly the career I dreamed of in college, but it pays the bills, and I get to be surrounded by beautiful things all day." "What did you dream of?" The question was asked softly, with genuine curiosity that caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in years. Not since before her marriage, before her world had narrowed to grocery lists and mortgage payments and the comfortable but suffocating routine of a life that looked successful from the outside but felt hollow within. "I wanted to be a photographer," she admitted, surprised by her own honesty. "Travel photography, specifically. I had this idea that I'd document disappearing cultures, remote places where people still lived connected to the land." Marcus leaned forward, his attention completely focused on her. "What stopped you?" The question hung in the air between them. What had stopped her? Fear, mostly. The practical voice that said photography wasn't a real career, that she needed stability, that dreams were for people younger and braver than she was. "Life, I suppose," she said finally. "It seemed too risky, too uncertain." "It's not too late," Marcus said, and something in his voice made her believe, for just a moment, that it might be true. The conversation continued to flow, moving from dreams to books to places they'd both want to visit. Marcus told her about backpacking through Europe the previous summer, about sleeping under the stars in the Swiss Alps and watching the sunrise over Barcelona. Sarah shared stories from her art history classes, describing paintings she'd studied, and the stories behind them. Somewhere during their second cup of coffee, Sarah realized that hours had passed. The kitchen clock read nearly midnight, and yet neither of them had made any move to end the evening. There was something magnetic about this conversation, about the way Marcus looked at her when she spoke, like her words mattered, like she was someone worth listening to. "I should probably head to bed," she said finally, though every part of her wanted to stay in this warm bubble of connection they'd created. Marcus nodded, but he didn't move from his seat. Instead, he reached across the small space between them and brushed a strand of hair away from her face. The touch was gentle, barely there, but it sent electricity shooting through her entire body. "Sarah," he said quietly, his voice rough with something she didn't dare name. She should have pulled away, should have reminded him that she was nearly twice his age, that this was inappropriate, that she was supposed to be the responsible adult in this situation. Instead, she found herself leaning into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed as his thumb traced the line of her cheekbone. When she opened her eyes, Marcus was looking at her with an intensity that took her breath away. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to stop him, he leaned forward until his lips were barely an inch from hers. "Is this okay?" he whispered, his breath warm against her mouth. Instead of answering with words, Sarah closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that was soft and tentative at first, then deeper as she felt him respond. His hands cupped her face gently, reverently, like she was something precious that might break if handled roughly. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Sarah's rational mind screamed at her to stop this, to explain why it couldn't happen. But her heart, her lonely, starved heart, begged her to stay in this moment just a little longer. "This is complicated," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know," Marcus replied, his forehead resting against hers. "But I can't pretend I don't feel this. I've thought about you, Sarah, more than I probably should have." The confession sent a thrill through her that she tried desperately to suppress. "Marcus, you're so young. You have your whole life ahead of you. You don't want to get tangled up with someone like me." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes serious. "Someone like you? You mean someone intelligent, beautiful, kind? Someone who actually listens when I talk about the things that matter to me? Someone who makes me feel like I'm more than just a college kid figuring things out?" The words hit her like a physical blow, not because they hurt, but because they healed something she hadn't realized was broken. When was the last time someone had described her as beautiful? When was the last time she'd felt seen, truly seen, by another person? "Sarah," Marcus said, taking her hands in his, "I know this is unexpected. I know it's not simple, but what I feel for you, it's real. And I think you feel it too." She did feel it. That was the terrifying truth. This wasn't just physical attraction or loneliness making her vulnerable. There was something deeper here, a connection that transcended age and circumstance and all the logical reasons why it shouldn't exist. "I do," she admitted, the words barely audible. "God help me, I do." Marcus smiled then, a slow, warm smile that lit up his entire face. "Then let's not overthink it. Just for tonight, let's not think about tomorrow or what anyone else would say. Let's just be." Sarah knew she should be stronger, should make the responsible choice. But as Marcus leaned in to kiss her again, all her careful defenses crumbled. She had been responsible her entire life, had always done what was expected, what was safe. For once, just once, she wanted to do what felt right instead of what looked right. They moved to the living room, settling onto the couch with careful space between them at first, as if proximity might break the spell. But gradually, inevitably, they moved closer. Marcus's arms slipped around her shoulders, and Sarah found herself curled against his side, feeling safer and more at peace than she had in months. They talked until dawn, about everything and nothing. Marcus told her about his fears for the future, his uncertainty about whether he was choosing the right path. Sarah shared stories from her marriage, the slow dissolution of love into habit, the loneliness that had crept in so gradually she hadn't noticed until it consumed everything. "You deserve better than that," Marcus said fiercely when she finished. You deserve someone who sees you, who appreciates everything you are, and you deserve someone who can give you a real future, Sarah replied, though the words tasted bitter. Someone young and unencumbered who can grow with you. What if I don't want that? Marcus asked. What if I want this? What if I want you? The question hung between them as the first rays of sunlight began to filter through the curtains. Sarah knew that in a few hours, Emma would wake up, and this magical suspended reality would end. The spell would break, and they would have to return to being who they were before: the neighbor and the college student, the responsible adult and the young man with his whole life ahead of him. But for now, in this quiet dawn moment, she allowed herself to believe that wanting something impossible didn't make her foolish. It made her human. I want this too, she whispered, the admission feeling like both a confession and a prayer. Marcus turned to face her fully, his hands framing her face with infinite tenderness. Then let's have it. Whatever this is, however long it lasts, let's have it. He kissed her then, and this time there was no hesitation, no careful space between them. Sarah melted into him, letting herself feel desired and desirable for the first time in longer than she could remember. His touch was reverent, patient, like he had all the time in the world to memorize every detail of this moment. They made love as the sun rose, slow and tender and achingly sweet. Marcus worshipped her body like it was sacred, whispered words of admiration and desire that made her feel beautiful in a way she'd forgotten was possible. When she cried from overwhelm, from gratitude, from the sheer relief of being wanted, he kissed away her tears without question or judgment. Afterward, they lay tangled together, their breathing gradually returning to normal. Sarah traced patterns on Marcus's chest, marveling at the solid reality of him, at the fact that this incredible night had actually happened. What happens now? She asked eventually, the question she'd been avoiding finally demanding acknowledgement. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his fingers combing gently through her hair. I don't know, he said honestly. I wish I had a perfect answer, but I don't. All I know is that it means something. It's not just a one-night thing, at least not for me. Sarah wanted to believe him, but the practical part of her mind was already cataloging all the obstacles. His parents, their age difference, his future plans, her reputation in their small town. The list seemed endless and insurmountable. I care about you too much to ask you to limit your life for me, she said finally. You should date people your own age. Fall in love with someone who can give you everything you deserve. What if what I deserve is you? Marcus countered. What if age is just a number and what really matters is how we feel about each other? It was a beautiful thought, but Sarah had lived long enough to know that feelings, however genuine, weren't always enough to overcome practical realities. Still, lying there in his arms with sunlight painting golden squares on the bedroom wall, she allowed herself to pretend that love could conquer all, that two people who truly saw each other could make any situation work. The sound of Emma's footsteps in the hallway broke the spell. Sarah quickly disentangled herself from Marcus, grabbing her robe and slipping into it as quietly as possible. Through the door, she could hear Emma calling for her, probably ready for breakfast and cartoons. I have to, Sarah began, gesturing toward the door. Marcus nodded, understanding. I know, go. She paused at the door, looking back at him. He looked younger in the morning light, more like the college student he actually was, and reality crashed over her in a cold wave. What had she done? What was she thinking? Sarah, Marcus said softly. No regrets, remember? Whatever happens, no regrets. She managed a smile and slipped out of the room, closing the door gently behind her. Emma was in the kitchen, standing on a chair and trying to reach the cereal from the top cabinet. Morning, sweetheart, Sarah said, lifting Emma down and kissing the top of her head. What would you like for breakfast? As she made pancakes and listened to Emma chatter about her dreams, Sarah tried to push the night's events into a separate compartment of her mind. This was real-life responsibility, caretaking, the simple joy of making a child happy. The other thing, the magical connection with Marcus, felt like something that had happened to someone else. But when Marcus appeared in the kitchen an hour later, freshly showered and dressed, and their eyes met across the room, Sarah knew she was fooling herself. The connection was still there, stronger than ever, crackling between them like electricity. Emma launched herself at her brother, chattering excitedly about the fort Sarah had helped her build and the butterflies they'd painted. Marcus listened, with the patience of someone who genuinely loved his little sister, but Sarah could feel his attention on her even as he focused on Emma's story. I should go, Sarah said when Emma ran off to get her art supplies to show Marcus her creations. Your parents will be home soon. Marcus followed her to the front door, his presence warm behind her as she gathered her purse and jacket. Sarah, he said when she reached for the doorknob. She turned to face him, and the look in his eyes nearly undid her. This isn't over. I know you think it should be, but it's not. Marcus, I'm not asking you to make any decisions right now, he interrupted gently. I'm just asking you not to close the door completely. Can you do that? Sarah looked at him, really looked at him. At 20 years old, he was technically an adult, capable of making his own choices. But she was older, supposedly wiser, and with that came responsibility. How could she drag him into her complicated life when he should be free to explore the world, to make mistakes with people his own age, to figure out who he was without the weight of her baggage? I need time to think, she said finally. Marcus nodded, accepting her non-answer. Take all the time you need. But Sarah, last night wasn't a mistake. At least, not for me. He leaned down and kissed her forehead, a gesture so tender it brought tears to her eyes. Then he opened the door for her, and she walked out into the bright morning sunshine, feeling like she was leaving a piece of herself behind. Over the following weeks, Sarah threw herself into work with renewed energy. She stayed late at the gallery, organized exhibitions that had been on her to-do list for months, and even started taking photography classes at the community college. It was easier to stay busy than to think about Marcus, though thoughts of him intruded at unexpected moments when she saw architecture students sketching buildings downtown, when she heard a song on the radio that reminded her of their conversation about travel, when she woke up from dreams that left her aching with longing. She had almost convinced herself that time and distance would make the feeling fade when Marcus appeared at the gallery one afternoon, 3 weeks after that night. He looked nervous, his hands shoved deep in the pockets of his jacket, but his eyes were determined. Hi, he said simply. Hi, Sarah replied, her heart hammering against her ribs. What are you doing here? I came to see you, to tell you that. I've thought about what you said, about me needing to be with people my own age, about how complicated this is. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to just above a whisper. And here's what I realized. I don't want easy. I don't want uncomplicated. I want you. Sarah glanced around the gallery, grateful that they were alone. Marcus, we can, he said firmly. Maybe not the way other couples can, maybe not without challenges, but we can, if you want to. The question hung between them, heavy with possibility and fear in equal measure. Sarah thought about all the reasons she should say no, all the ways this could end badly for both of them. But she also thought about the night they'd shared, about how alive she'd felt in his arms, about the way he looked at her like she was the most fascinating person in the world. What would it look like? She asked finally. Realistically, what would we be doing? Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him since he'd walked in. I don't know. We'd figure it out as we go. Maybe dinner sometimes. Maybe long conversations like the one we had that night. Maybe more if you wanted it. I'm not asking you to define anything or make promises about the future. I'm just asking you to give us a chance. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision. When she opened them, Marcus was watching her with patient hope, and she knew her heart had already made the choice. Her head was still fighting. Okay, she said quietly. Let's see what happens. The smile that lit up Marcus's face was worth every moment of uncertainty that would follow. He reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers, and for the first time in years, Sarah felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever obstacles they would have to navigate, they would face them together. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough.